Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my YouTube channel, or if you're new here, hello. My name is Alivia Brown, and I am currently a fourth-year undergraduate student at UCLA studying anthropology. What's crazy is by the time this video goes up, myself and my incredible special guest here will both be graduated, which I just can't believe. So that's me. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. My name is Elena, and I'm also a fourth-year anthropology major. I came into UCLA as a transfer student, and anthro is just my main major.
Yeah, and we met through like our Anthro little honors program that we're in at UCLA. So that's that's like our connection to each other, which is so fun. And I've been doing these videos for like almost 2 years now, which is kind of crazy. And like it's just my perspective. So I just thought it would be so fun to have people share like their perspectives and opinions about anthropology that isn't mine. So, because that's what it is, right? It's all about like understanding people and experiences and stuff like that. So perfect. Thank you so much for introducing yourself. Now, my first question for you, which I'm actually so excited to like learn what everybody thinks about all these things, is how did you actually find the anthropology major? Because I found that like people stumble into it in so many different ways.
Yeah, actually, I had never heard of it prior until I had read uh, Zora Neale Hurston's book, Their Eyes Were Watching.
Mm-hmm.
And I was reading her bio. I mean, I loved the book. And then I was reading her bio and I saw that she was an anthropologist. And I went, what is that? And I looked and then I saw, I don't think she's really highly acclaimed in the field. I think there are people who find her work problematic. But I mean, just like that was my basic introduction. And then I sort of divulged further into the field and started looking up like other stuff. And then I thought, this is so cool. And I want to major in this.
That is so cool. And did you read that in like high school, in like at community college at UCLA?
High school. Yeah.
Okay. So then you knew what it was before starting college.
Yeah. Yeah. I found out about it in high school. And then when I went to community college, I put anthro as my major. And with that, but I mean, prior to community college, I still didn't have a full grasp of what anthropology was until I took like biological anthropology, archaeology, cultural anthropology. Then that sort of formed more so the basis of my further interest in the field.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that perfectly transitions into another thing that I was wondering, which is, I mean, I obviously know you from your research and what I perceive you to have found interesting, but I'm curious which subfield of anthropology really grabs you and why.
That is very interesting. So focus is sociocultural, which I love. I mean, cultures fascinate me. From a very young age, I've always been a people watcher, you know. And
Yes.
that's basically what we're studying to be is like professional stalkers.
Pretty much.
But I also really do love evolutionary topics within biological anthro. So I guess that's sort of more so like my back and forth. I mean, if I wasn't doing sociocultural, I would probably be doing what you're doing, which is like the anthro, I mean, I'm sorry, the biological anthro and like focusing on like women and like the holes that are within that field.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. They're both, I actually have to agree with you. Sociocultural and biological anthropology are definitely my two favorites. And I feel like we could really benefit from some like the intersection between the two, because I feel like there's a lot that we know, but both of them would like benefit each other in terms of like how things actually, how change gets made, I guess is the better way to put that. You know, and like we have all this information about like, from my research, for example, like women's bodies, right? And then we have like information on how like maybe people respond to change or policy implementation and stuff like that. I'm like, if we just put these two things together, that would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, yeah. How did you learn? Did you decide that you were interested in sociocultural anthropology from like a class, or was it like doing your research, or how did you like know that that was the one that stood out to you?
I think in community college, I sort of had a leaning towards it. But
Mm,
when I took my first year here at UCLA, I took sociocultural classes, and I was really interested in how it intersects with like public health issues.
mm,
Like medical anthropology is another cool one that I find very interesting. And I thought it was interesting how you can overlap like sociocultural with other stuff. Like, for example, my project, how it's focusing on like environmental issues and like policy.
Mhm.
And I think it's sort of interesting how culturally you can go beyond, just like, for example, like American culture, but you can divulge further into like an issue or sort of like a whole in society and bridge those
Yeah.
two together.
I love that so much. So well spoken. Oh my God, stop it. That was awesome. I completely agree with you. And this isn't directly related to anthropology, but it's something that I'm wondering. How was your transition from the community college anthropology program to the UCLA anthropology program? Because I know that I do have a lot of transfer students that watch these videos. So I'm very curious to hear what your experience was like.
Yeah. So the community college that I went to only offered cultural, biological, and anthro. So we didn't even have a linguistic anthropology class.
Mm,
And they really just, each quarter, semester at my community college was 16 weeks. So we really got sort of like the basis of those fields, but nothing really specific. Um,
mhm.
so again, like when I left community college, I had like the basics, but I didn't really fully know what anthropology was until I stepped further into UCLA and undergrad work. And that's where it expanded my mind more so of like what anthropology can be.
Yeah, that makes sense. That was kind of it for me too. I mean, I was at UCLA for the 4 years, but even those first four intro classes are like incredibly simple. So I felt like when I started getting into the upper divisions and it was like the application of the like basic stuff that we learned at the beginning, I was like, oh, so this is what this field is really looking like, you know?
Yeah,
Was
it
there,
interesting for me when
it's so cool. Was there like a class or like lower division or upper division that really like sparked your interest?
I think it was the first quarter here actually.
Mm.
I think I had you for that class, evolution of human sexual behavior with.
Oh, that class was so good.
Yeah, it was that class and another one I took that quarter, health, race, and inequality, something like
Mhm,
that, but basically focusing on like medical anthropology.
mhm.
Those classes really opened my eyes as far as like, wow, this is like what we learned in the basics in our
Yeah,
and now it's being applied into, like other fields of research.
I completely agree. On my channel all the time, I preach about medical anthropology, which obviously isn't the one that I focus on, but I feel like it does the best job of actually like implementing all the things that you learn, you know? And I always thought that that was so cool.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. I'm in complete agreement with you so far. Okay, the next thing, which is like the main thing that I'm actually really excited to ask you, is obviously I know you through your research, right? Like your project, that's literally how we met each other. And I'm so curious how you got into like what was the process like of looking at all these things that you could research, right? And then really deciding that your project was what you wanted to do. And also maybe mention what your project is, because now I'm realizing I haven't actually asked you what that is.
So, well, I'll open about my project.
Perfect.
So I am studying an area that I'm from, which is the Salton Sea. So I'm from the Eastern Coachella Valley. And basically, the research questions that I came into with this was, do people view the drying Salton Sea as being toxic to their lives? Do they view like it as impeding anyway? And are the inequalities, present? Do they view this as an environmental justice issue? Which is basically what I'm studying. It's an environmental justice project. And how I got to that was I am such a sucker for environmental issues. I'm all for, save the planet.
Oh, me too, girl. Me too.
But I have such troubles pinpointing things. anthropology is so broad, and what we said before, it can be really applied to anything, which is great, but also makes it very hard to narrow it down. And
Yes.
I felt like my project sticking close to home is one that would keep my interest and I guess fuel the fire for my dedication to what I'm studying. But also, I mean, when I look at my or try to look at my project as an outsider, I'm like, this is kind of interesting. It's like the Salton Sea, this man-made lake, and it was once a hotspot for a bunch of celebrities in the 50s, and now all of a sudden it's sort of like this neglected hole in California. And I guess, looking at how the communities look at it. Oh, another thing that I forgot to mention
Oh,
was,
please.
um, like being from the area, we really never heard about it or talked about it, like how it's a growing public health threat. And I didn't hear about that until I took a environmental geology class in community college. And which it was frightening because community college, that's like adult age. And it's like, why have I not heard about this sooner? Why has anybody else around me not heard about it sooner? And so I guess sort of that hole that I noticed was also what had sprung me forth into pursuing my project.
Mm, that makes so much sense. And obviously I've heard bits and pieces of that, but I did not know the full like context. So I'm so glad to know that. Um, and I'm curious if you'd be okay talking a little bit about some of your findings, as this is in my opinion, a very important topic.
Yeah. So yeah, I've heard of people telling me, like, well, for example, the note what they notice about their health is, like when, for example, like I have one participant who moved to the area during COVID and he noticed, like the effects on his health, lack of, I mean, more instances of fatigue, difficulty breathing. And then another participant who had moved away from the valley noticed improvements.
Mhm.
And, and I think it's very interesting where they notice themselves as sort of being a product of the environment, of, like the environment producing these health outcomes. And the way I've approached my research or like my findings specifically is sort of like you have the environment and what it produces in terms of like um, suffering or like, health outcomes, but also it stems from like these greater larger inequalities, which is, I mean, another thing that I've kind of talked about in class was how there's also a lack of basic infrastructure, like,
Mhm.
well, like you have an area which is primarily Hispanic, under poverty level, um, agricultural workers. And so you have that demographic. And then, but you also have like grocery stores that are like 30 minutes away, along with high gas prices. And like the only
Mhm.
close proximity is mini marts, which do not provide the healthiest options. And so you have like all these other factors that just sort of highlight the systemic, like what do we need to do? Like, where do we need to direct like policy and like our focuses on like how to improve the standard and quality of living.
Right. That makes so much sense. And ideally, correct me if I'm wrong, the idea here is we do this anthropological research and then that can like inform the policy, right? To actually get those changes made.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like you can't have people making policies or decisions about an area which they don't even live in.
Mhm.
I mean, that's what's great about anthropology is because it provides that insight to the human experience and people's thoughts and what they need and what they feel is lacking in the areas that they live and work in.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And it's so awesome to hear like these topics be explored in a way that's, so close to your heart. Like you spent so much time on this project for the last 2 years. So I feel like you would know, like you would know what these things like actually look like in action and the ideal changes that would get made. So I guess from that, I'm curious if it was a perfect world and completely up to you, like what would your research, like what would the next step for it be? Would it be like publication? Would it be like sharing it with people? Would it just be like sharing it at our conference? Doesn't have to be like big things. I'm just so curious.
Ideally, I mean, well, obviously the conference we have in a week, which is crazy. Yeah, I know. I guess, I've thought about that too. I mean, I would be interested in publication, or, I mean, even divulging further into the research. I mean, I think I would continue, if I were to proceed with graduate school, I would still want to pursue the same topic.
Mhm.
But ideally, like activism work, like sort of in maybe informing policymakers, this is what people have to deal with. This is how they sort of internalize the struggles that they deal with in
Mhm.
the area, and provide that sort of insight. And maybe this policymaker or this urban planner will take in mind, like, oh, okay, this is what we need to focus on. We don't need another multi-million-dollar racetrack in the area. We need a grocery store.
Yeah. And you're taking it from someone who really knows what they're talking about, right? Like, I think that's the cool thing about anthropology, or you studying something that you are like in such close proximity with, is you're not like sending out these mass surveys, right? And getting vague opinions. It's like you really, really know.
Yeah, that's where I think Anthro kind of differentiates from like all
Mhm.
those, like statistical polls. Sort of more qualitative research is, I'm
Mhm.
sorry, quantitative research.
Mhm.
We offer that qualitative input. We offer, more than just numbers. We
Yeah.
offer valuable insight.
Yeah, I think it's so hard. I feel like there's so many fields out there where it is this like either like quantitative or qualitative analysis. And I think obviously Anthro does lean on the side of qualitative, but you can see it like trying to walk the line. And I think that the best research, again, in a perfect world, would be like finding this intersection, right? Like combining these anthropological findings with like the quantitative information that we have. And then like I feel like we'd really know what's actually going on in the world, you know?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, people say anthro social sciences or like the soft sciences.
Yeah.
But really, I mean, with people and other factors are constantly changing. And, I mean, as I've gone on with my research project, I've found like, like with lithium, there are different talks about that, and which, is another thing that could really drastically change the environment. And then, people's thoughts about that, what they think. And, there's just so many moving parts, and it's almost really hard to just, it's like, it's not numbers, you're not working with like stable things here and then, manipulating it to get a result. It's like things are constantly changing. And then
Yeah.
like qualitative, there's just so much you can do with that and view it and make implications from.
No, I completely agree with you. It's such like a beautiful thing that again, I feel like not enough people know about, but it's so, so important because it offers this insight that I do feel is a little bit undervalued, but would kind of change everything. So going off of that too, I know you said that you were interested in like activism work and also grad school. Do you know, like, again, no pressure. I personally am not a fan of this question because the answer is always different. Um, do you know if you'd want to like keep doing anthropology or go into the workforce a little bit and then go back to it, or just use the things you've learned from anthropology in your career life? Like, what does the post grad like situation look like for you?
Yeah, so I am not going right into grad school. I mean,
It's a lot of work.
I know I needed that break just, for my mental health
Mhm.
personally, just to step away from like academia and, like all the literature and whatnot. But it is very fascinating. I do see myself going back to grad school or pursuing like an MA. I would do an MA in Anthro,
Mhm.
at least for right now. I If I were to, I would think I would stick within the social sciences. That's the one field that I find just very, fascinating. Um, if I don't do Anthro, I mean, I do have like an interest in like psychology, economics, which falls into like my current post grad plan is obviously job because college is financially draining.
Mm. Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah, definitely, especially UCLA. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think I'm looking more so into like other industries out here in LA,
Hmm.
California. Um, I would consider like doing like nonprofit or maybe like diversity type fields, like diversity and inclusion.
Hmm.
I think what's great about like Anthro is it could also be a great um, for employers specifically, hiring somebody that knows how to communicate with people and how to interview and gather data from. And, I think that's another valuable asset that we as anthropologists can offer.
Oh, absolutely. I feel like it's really transferable. That's kind of my whole thing is like you learn all these like real person skills, exactly that, how to communicate, how to engage in like a kind way, understanding diverse communities, like all these things that are so important, but often I think in a lot of degrees you don't get explicitly taught, but like in anthro you do in like a really cool way. And so I completely agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, I've noticed it, my years here in UCLA or in general in college is that, my anthropology professors are way more empathetic than any
They're
other.
so nice.
I know. I'm like, wow, wow. But it makes sense because as
Mhm.
anthropologists, it would be very difficult to thrive here without having empathy, without having, that in the back of your mind, always thinking of like other factors that play into, why this person is answering this way or like why
Oh
they're
yeah.
this way.
Oh, I completely agree with you. I went one time, it was a while ago, but I was on campus and I would like, I don't know. I just, you talk to professors after class, especially the anthro ones, because, I have a bio minor. So that department's different in itself. But I'd like walk on campus and like wave hi to like professors. And my friends would be like, who is that? Like, they're not our age. They're like, oh, that's this professor. Oh, that's that professor. Like, they know who you are. I'm like, yeah, super nice guy. Like all like super kind. Like, those who I am, they're like, oh my gosh, that's correct. That would never happen to me. Like, I don't know. They're just such nice, cool people.
Wow. I
Mhm.
didn't know about that. Wow.
Mhm.
So fascinating. I mean, in community college, like I had a close relationship with like one of my math professors, but that's because, that was a challenging class within itself. And I was always going to office hours. And I feel like if you don't really have that sort of like intimate space, like,
Mhm.
for example, I feel like with our honors courses that we've taken, we've
Mhm.
kind of gotten to know our professors a little more than prior classes that have like these huge lecture halls because we have that one-on-one interaction. We're, working throughout the quarter with each
Mhm.
professor towards a product, which I think
Yeah.
also kind of fosters that close relationship.
Yeah. Cause there's only like 12 of us. So we really get, and like, I mean, it's 3 hours is a lot. Like I'm feeling that 3 hours by the end of our class. And so that's like we spend all this individualized attention on each of us. So even now, like if we saw, like if I was on campus, I feel like if I just saw Professor Lloyd, like our current professor, I'd probably say hi, like she knows me, you know?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's like that. And also it's interesting because, we're obviously anthropologists and, it's like we have something to talk about. We can,
True.
about anthropology.
Oh my God. Yeah. We're people who study people, which probably means we're people person or like, you know what I mean? Which is just a really unique thing. My like, I think it's like my last main question is just like an overall broad thing. You've obviously talked about it a little bit already, is just why do you think anthropology is important as a field? It's such an open-ended question, but I just think hearing different perspectives on this would be awesome.
Yeah, well, for one, it provides a lot of insight into communities, culture, ideals, which is
Mhm.
so important. I mean, like, for example, I get asked this question a lot, why is anthropology important? Why should you get a degree in anthropology? And not gonna lie, sometimes it is hard not to take offense to that
Oh,
question.
me too, dude. Me too.
Yeah, and I always like lead with an example of, like, for example, let's say you have like a multi-million dollar, construction project, and they want to communicate with or work with like local entities and like local communities, and if you don't know how to come across to that community, you're in really bad shape because now you're going to be open with a lot of criticism. I mean, this isn't me vouching for corporate America, but but in any case, it's like if you want to come in and do business with somebody or negotiate or do anything that's mutually beneficial, you have to know how to make it mutually beneficial. And if you don't know, for example, like the values of the community or like any background, you're going to have tough luck. And so as humans, we study humans, and when you work with somebody or talk with somebody, you're not dealing with a machine, you're dealing with a person who has a history, a background, emotions, feelings. And
Yeah.
when you know that, it becomes more manageable to know how to proceed.
That I have chills right now. That's so beautiful. I completely agree that it's such a beautiful thing. And I think it's so important, but it's so awesome to hear other people explain why they think it's important. My last question for you is, because obviously I have like a whole range of ages that watch these videos. I get questions from like high school students all the time, which I think is so fun. Our year, like undergraduate students. And then I'm always amazed when people are like, oh yeah, like I'm a master's or a PhD student. I'm like you're cooler than me. Like, I don't, I don't know what kind of help I can provide. But is there anything just like in general about anthropology or like your experience with anthropology that you would just want people to know who happen to stumble across this video?
Yeah. So, one, we are very nice people.
We are. This is true. This is true.
Very nice people. And we look at everything. There's nothing really that we can't look at. It's, I mean, I know we've talked about this before, but it's really an open-ended field. I mean, you can apply it to anything like corporate world, nonprofits, education, any setting. And so you really should not limit yourself as far as what you can look at, what you can study, because I guarantee you there's pretty much work that has been done on it, or if not, you can be the pioneer in the field.
That is so true. I feel like even us, like trying to find like what we're going to research, it's like you look up something and so much is already there, but you get a little further in, you're like, oh, but there's stuff that's not there too,
Yeah, definitely. There's
Yeah.
always, I mean, it's never ending. I mean, there's always, work that, okay, once you finish this, I noticed this hole, and then you
Mhm.
sort of pass the torch to somebody, and
Yeah.
then they can proceed, and then
Mhm.
it's like a never ending, like you're always adding layers and layers and building it.
Yeah. Exactly. And I feel like too, it's like there's all these works that have already been done and you could always replicate them, like see if you have the same experience doing similar research, right? Or maybe how your bias as an anthropologist is different from that other person who went and did this project, and see
Yeah.
what you gain from those differences. Like even the things that have already been done could be done again, and yet it's still different.
Yeah, you brought up an interesting point too, is, I mean, my mom, she's a psychologist, and
Hmm.
sometimes we get into quarrels because I tell her, you're thinking like a psychologist, I view this because I'm an anthropologist. And, and I think it's also interesting is, like the bridge between different fields and
Hmm.
sort of like the different perspectives you can bring to.
Hmm. Oh, absolutely. It's so important. And I think now in anthropology, it's like starting to do exactly that, right? Like you have all these like subfields that like overlap with all these other fields where I know it didn't used to be like that.
Not, I, not from my knowledge, but I mean, when I studied in community college, it was just anthropology. And then now you start seeing more of like, I mean, I think even UCLA is adding more minors or but
Yeah.
yeah, it's like you can really combine anthro with anything.
Yeah. Cause it's like people like most of the things that we study, people have their hand in it somehow, So I feel like there's always more to learn there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So okay, well, those are all the questions that I had prepared. Thank you, literally, thank you so much for coming on and doing this with me. This is amazing. And again, I feel like I have so much context for like you and your project and anthropology, and I love it.
Thank you for inviting me. This was so much fun. I love talking and fangirling about anthro. I mean,
Right? Because I'm like, I don't like know, like I know people like in our class, but like most of my friends aren't anthropology majors, so it's fun to talk to people who get it.
yeah, 1000%. And that's what I think is great about your channel is that you provide that platform for people to,
Mhm.
like any questions, any topics is like open floor. And, and it's such a great thing to have is like a center place where people can ask questions, learn from each other. And, and I think you do a great job of that in your videos.
Oh, thank you. That's so nice. My week has been made. So we're good. Well, thank you so, so much again.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And to anyone watching, if you guys have any questions for me or my wonderful guest, definitely leave them in the comment section down below, and I will make sure that they get seen and replied to. So I'm going to stop this recording now, and then I will talk to you in a second. Okay.